Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. I was just being told to wait for a second by the tech team. But my name is Megan Waters, and it is my great pleasure to be here tonight to announce a great panel. Our discussion is Financing Nutrition for a Healthier Climate, the Power of Sustainable Diets. And we have a fantastic team starting, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Ambassador Earthren Cousin, who is, she was the founder of Food Systems for the Future. She served as the U.S. ambassador to the United Agencies, what's now the FAO, and she was also the executive director of the UN World Food Programs. With no further ado, Ambassador Cousin.
Thank you, and I very much appreciate that short, sweet introduction. The question they gave me for presentation this evening is, why do we need to invest in integrated climate and food systems transformation? And so here we are, folks, at the end of COP28. At the end of COP28, where many of us came to this COP excited, because at COP27, the Minister Miriam Amari said, I will have food systems at the center of COP28. There were 600 different panels on food systems, food security, agriculture, climate, nutrition, and a declaration with 150 plus now countries signing on to moving food systems transformation forward, and particularly as part of their NDCs, investing more in nutrition, investing more in not just for environmental health, but for human health. And then we have the negotiators in another room, and the likelihood of us getting food systems into the final declaration is slim to none. We will get food probably in the same places it's been in the past, in the preamble, in the adaptation section. We may get agriculture in once. Optimism is what you should leave here with, because it's COP28 and it's the first time that we've had 600 panels, we've had a declaration, we've been at the center of the conversation of all of the ministers. And if you've worked in the multilateral system for a while, you know nothing happens quickly. It is not revolutionary change, it is intermittent change on an evolutionary basis. And we've learned some amazing lessons as a part of all of this. One of those lessons is mistake for us not to spend as much time with the environmental ministers pre-COP as we do with the agriculture ministers, because the negotiators are from the environmental departments, and our failure to get food systems into their instructions means that we're not going to get into the document. Lessons learned. We've got a lot of work to do in front of us between now and COP30, but we know what that work is. And that work includes ensuring that we have the conversations that are required for moving more capital into the transformation of the food system, not just for environment, but for health and nutrition. And that requires us to not only shift from those 5 soy, wheat, rice, corn, and sugar that are the primary beneficiaries of most subsidies, and moving fruits and vegetables, particularly in the United States, from specialty crops into those crops that receive additional subsidies, but also supporting that when those subsidies support regenerative agriculture, we need to also ensure that they support crop diversity. Because right now, the notion that, and I even had my own Secretary of Agriculture say this to me 2 days ago, but Earthren, we grow enough food. Whoa! We grow enough calories. We grow enough grains. we do not grow enough of the fruits and vegetables that are necessary to support a diverse and nutritious diet for every person on this planet on a daily basis, on a regular basis. And as a result, we have 3.1 billion people who cannot afford a diverse diet. And that doesn't change unless the money changes. Because farmers will tell you, I grow what I get paid to grow. Whether it's from the government for subsidies or consumers and markets for what I sell. And there's a data point that Mr. Blanco and I are going to work on over the next 2 years that says that we only grow about 35% of the fruits and vegetables that are necessary to support the diet, the diet needs of the entire global population. That must change. So when I'm asked the question of why do we need to invest, those are the reasons that we need to invest. For our environment and for our health. And the two areas that we need to change, where we need to see additional financing, is from public subsidies, as well as from private sector capital. And I'll spend a moment on that before I close. On private sector capital, what we are hearing from private sector investments, both asset managers and owners as well as the corporates, is that for them to move more capital into the agriculture space to support the type of transformation that we are discussing, both for environmental and human health, they need two priorities from us right now. One is MRVs that are cost effective. What is the measurement, reporting, and verification system that will move capital that can ensure that the challenge that we have with agriculture from an environmental standpoint is the controversial over sequestration of carbon from areas under active cultivation. And unless we can begin to answer those questions in a way that move us beyond the questions of greenwashing for agriculture, we will not get the private sector money to flow from a climate finance standpoint. Why is that important that we make it flow? 4.8% of the climate finance capital today from particularly from private sector, goes to food and agriculture. And the reason is because we can't measure the emissions reduction from agricultural production. So we need to answer that question. And the second is, what are the policies and regulatory that we need to support that system that will ensure the ability of private sector capital to flow from a reduction of risk standpoint, as well as from a opportunity in the most efficient manner. Those are the questions that we need to work on answering over the next 2 years to look at moving more private sector capital. Then we can get excited about the possibility of creating those capital stacks we keep talking about, of public capital, philanthropic capital, and private sector capital, to actually help us move beyond just talking about the change that we need to actually scaling the change that is required. So we know what is necessary. We know why we need to do it. Let's just all work together to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Cousin. It is next my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Lawrence Hadid, and he is the Executive Director of the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, GAIN. With no further ado, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Megan. Is this is on? Yes. Thank you, Megan. Wow, Earthrin, that was fantastic. Thank you. Not that I'm surprised. Thank you. I wanted to make like 5 or 6 points. I'll be very brief. First point is there's a lot of money in the food system. A lot of money in the food system. Second point is it's mostly being directed to the wrong directions, in the wrong ways. So it's not really about extra money. It's about diverting the existing money towards the things we care about. As Earthrin said, food that is healthier, food that is less destroying of the environment, food that generates more employment and better livelihoods. It's about influencing those decisions about what to grow, what to produce, what to process, what to eat, how to dispose of food, all that stuff. the top of the summit, I guess, is true value of food. The prices of food that really reflect the things we really care about. At the moment, current prices generate massive externalities in the health system, massive externalities in the environment system. But until we get that true value of food summit, there are lots of footholds we can make as we move towards that summit. And there are a lot of people working on true value of food, trying to come up with the right metrics and trying to figure out ways to operationalize it. But until we can get there, the first foothold is how much are governments, donors, and the private sector actually spending on food systems? We actually don't know. Joe Biden, I love this quote. He says, "Don't tell me about your priorities, tell me about your budgets. Show me your budgets." That's what the reflections are. If you looked at the GAIN budgets, you'd see what our priorities are. Sometimes they are aligned with things I say, but that's the true priority set, budgets. So there's this fantastic initiative by the World Bank and IFAD called 3FS. GAIN was involved at the beginning, and there are a nice group of organizations doing this. They're mapping, going through thousands of budget lines and saying which are in the food system, which aren't. I think more importantly, which bits of the food system are governments investing in and which bits aren't they, which bits are donors investing in, which bits aren't they. They haven't done the private sector work yet because that's really, really tough, but they've done it for governments and donors for about 5 or 6 countries, and I've been really surprised by some of the results, and we're going to keep supporting that initiative. But even that initiative doesn't tell us much about intersectionality. So that 3FS initiative from the bank and IFAD will tell us how much food system money is going to, for example, climate, how much is going to emergency, how much is going to nutrition, but it won't tell us much about how much is going to climate and nutrition. So we, with FAO, WHO, Scaling Up Nutrition Movement, developed something called ICAN, the Initiative for Climate Action and Nutrition. And we went through a whole bunch of investment-related areas to see how much is being spent on climate and nutrition by governments, by the Green Climate Fund, by the World Bank, and by the private sector. And the bad news is that there's not much overlap between these two. And remember, food systems are, one of the beauty of food systems is it promises us, it gives us the opportunity, I would say it's the imperative to break down the silos. But at the moment, we're not doing a very good job, at least in the climate and nutrition space. So some numbers, NDCs, only 2% of NDCs have a proper plan for incorporating nutritious foods. That's kind of mind-blowing. Only 16% of NAPs have proper plans for including nutritious foods. On public procurement, governments buy lots of food for their schools, for their social protection programs. 83% of public procurement policies across the governments say nothing about the kinds of foods Erthran was talking about. That's a scandal. Green Climate Fund, only 3% of Green Climate Fund grants for the last 2 years say anything about nutritious foods. International climate finance, apart from the Green Climate Fund, is even worse, only 1%. This is all in the ICAN baseline report, which if you just type that into your search engine, you'll find it. And the private sector, we don't have a good estimate for the private sector. We've done an approximation looking at the World Benchmarking Alliance, 350 food and agriculture companies. We rank them on how well are they doing on nutrition and sustainability using the WBA metrics. 0 out of 350 are doing well on both of those things. It's quite shocking. So I will stop there. The last thing I'll say is it's not impossible to bring climate and nutrition together. GAIN, this is the infomercial for GAIN. GAIN is doing this at a very small scale level. It's a $50 million impact investing fund called Nutritious Food Financing, N3F, Nutritious Food Financing Facility, N3F. It's 50 million, and it's channeling loans of between $500,000 and $1 million to small and medium enterprises in Africa for SMEs that are producing and supplying nutritious food that is aligned with climate goals. 1.5 is a bit ambitious, but it's aligned with 2% climate goals and it's, you know, it's happening. We're making loans to SMEs that have a good business plan and can meet those two criteria. But we need thousands of these N3F impact funds out there, thousands of them. We need to get money to SMEs because they are the ones that provide food to the most vulnerable people on the planet, those at risk of malnutrition. And my final point is malnutrition is the human face of unabated climate change. Thank you.
Oh, no. Thank you so much, Lawrence. And it is now my pleasure to invite up the 5 panelists. And if everyone could just give one more clap for our 2 initial speakers, because I think they've each really gotten to the heart of a whole week, hundreds of sessions. And where is it really now? What really matters? What do we do so that things are different and we move in the direction we need to in the very short time frame we have? So thank you both very much. And now if the other panelists could come forward, that would be great. A couple of these. Thank you. All right. Does anyone know exactly the time this minute? Do you know what time it is? Here, have a seat.
Thank you.
5:30. Okay. I want to make sure this is working. Okay, so it is 5:30. The group before us was exuberant and stayed in the room for a while, and we're off to a slow start. So we have 2 choices. We can all try to do it like when they would play a record on the wrong speed, just speak like that, or else just try to be really concise about our points, including I will be relatively short in introducing each of you, and then we can kind of move forward. So down on the end there, we have Juan Carlos Mendoza. He is the Director of Environment, Climate, Gender, and Social Inclusion at the International Fund for Agricultural Development. Thank you so much for being here. Next up, we have Marcel Bernoux, and he is the Senior Natural Resource Officer at the FAO in the Office of Climate Change, Biodiversity, and the Environment. Next up, we have Dr. Hemming Shaw, and he is the Director of Child Health, Development, and Children's Investment at the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, CIF. And last, but by no means least, we have Matthews Mahur here, and he is the Deputy Executive Director of the National Food and Nutrition Commission for Zambia. So I will just quickly, and apologize for this shuffling of papers. Sorry, I was meant to have a table there, so you're now seeing what happens when I don't. But I would like to start, if I could, with a question actually to you, Mr. Bernoux, and the question has to do with the FAST partnership. That's the Food and Agriculture for Sustainable Transformation Initiative, and looking at it and the ICANN and sort of some of the overlap. And for people who aren't aware of it, FAST, stemming from last year, COP27 in Egypt, it was an initiative designed to provide a multi-stakeholder space aiming to catalyze and accelerate the transformation of agriculture and food systems by 2030. And in some ways that's similar to ICANN, and the question to you is, how do they interplay?
Okay, so thanks for the invitation, the opportunity to be here. Like we have FAO and IFAD sister organization, I would say ICANN and FAST were sister partnership, and we have really a main goal. And as you expressed in your speech, we know where we want to go. I guess we need to all the possibilities we have. At COP27, you said Egypt put different initiatives that are related to agriculture, food security. So one was FAST, with an angle that was mostly on climate finance. I will go back to that. ICANN was really clearly on nutrition, on the link with climate. There was another one was AWARE, on water, and the one also on food loss on loss so far. So basically, you see the complementarity. Now we are evolving on all on the different settings. So FAST is on the FAO, and we still have that focus on finance, but with two different angles, quality and quantity. We had different numbers that was provided saying that we are not having enough finance and investment going to agri-food system. And here it would include all also the nutrition aspect. And this is true. But it's even worse than that. The tendency is not going in the right direction. It's not we do not have enough, we have less and less every year. So this is something that we need to revert. And this is basically here the main goal, aspirational goal of FAST to revert that tendency. I can give you just one number. We're looking at the OECD Development Assistance Committee number, and here you see that if you look at agri-food system, basically we have only today, the last number that refer to 2021, 20% only. 10 years ago, it was 35%. So you see the erosion we have in that share that going to this sector. So we are not attractive enough. Why we're not attractive enough? So for that, FAST, we want to work on 3 pillars. And it was mentioned, and when you mentioned MRV system, we need data, we need number. We cannot address what we do not know, and if we cannot monitor our progress, we will fail again. So we need data. So one of the pillars of FAST is data. Another pillar, and Lawrence mentioned that a lot, NDCs. So we need to work on the policies. We need to work on the policies. It's an interesting angle because it's all different single government that we can reach out and to say, look, your NDCs is missing that and that and that. So this is a point. On finance, on the three cannot be disconnected because if you go to GCF asking to support one specific project on nutrition, on livestock or whatever, the first reflex of the GCF will to look at the policy on the MRV system. So we need to work on those 3 pillars. So this is what we want to do on FAST, but we do not want to work, and we'll end here, to work in isolation. On when it's nutrition, we will call our colleagues on ICANN to join forces to do that on that specific angle. So.
Thank you so much. It was really helpful and incredibly interesting. And I want to turn, if I could, to Hemming and ask you, whether or not the share of to share the perspective of SIF, specifically on the work linking climate and nutrition action. And if you could provide a couple examples for us, we would very, very much appreciative.
Sure. Thank you so much for this opportunity. So I'll talk about 2 facts. Why is it that SIF is interested in climate and nutrition as a joint work, and what is it that we are doing in terms of examples? So as we know, the food security and nutrition crisis, it disproportionately affects low and middle income countries, and more so the women and children staying in those countries. Secondly, while we address the climate change and food system transformation as one, it will affect both the areas. And nature is not only a critical carbon sink, but it is also essential for current and future food security. But the problem with food system is that it is much more complex, and currently the progress that has been made on food system seems to be multiple years behind than the progress that has been made on energy. Food is increasingly related to social norms, both in terms of how we consume that and also in terms of how it is grown. And the current philanthropic capital that is going towards food system transformation is very low. It is just 1.7% of entire philanthropic capital for small-scale farmers.
Sorry, could I just interrupt? And could you say that statistic one more time, just a little bit louder, because there's some mood music that was getting in the way, and I think people should hear it.
Sure. So overall, the philanthropic capital which is going into food system transformation is only 1.7%. So what is it that we are doing to change some of these scenarios? There are 4 main buckets that we try to focus on. First is fostering innovation. And the way we try and foster innovation is that how do we work with small-scale farmers? How do we work with self-help groups? What is the kind of capacity building that is required? What is the kind of innovation? And when we talk of innovation, not just technical innovation, but also what is the kind of social innovation that is required while working with these groups? What is the kind of collaborative platforms that are required? And how is it that CIF can play its role in unlocking the finance? The second pillar or the bucket is the evidence generation, like the work that we are supporting ICANN and similar work, but not just creating baseline and thinking about where is it that we want to lend, but also creating sub-national roadmaps in some of the states in India, but also in other geographies that we work in. The third part is how do we collaborate with local foundations, because when local foundations give in their money, it also triggers more sort of support from the federal government and state government. And last is how do we work to integrate key features in existing programs. So just to give an example, we are currently supporting a huge cash transfer program for pregnant women and lactating mothers. But when we started collecting data on how that cash is being utilized, the majority of that cash is being utilized to purchase packaged food. 70% of children and mothers are either eating biscuits or chips. So what is the kind of behavior change communication that is needed so that when social protection improves, there is better availability of right kind of food, which is good for mothers and children, but it is also good for the climate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that problem you've just described, I believe, and not my area of expertise, but I believe it has some very strong universal elements, which is the food shifting of people once they're off to having money to purchase for it. I'd like to next, if I could, ask you, Matthews, to provide some, and as I mentioned earlier, he's coming to us as the Director of National Food and Nutrition Commission in Zambia, and any country-specific perspective that you can give for your, from Zambia, sharing the challenges to ensure adequate funding for nutrition and break the financial silos to ensure that the financing at the climate and food nexus really clicks together as it should.
Thank you very much. I'm actually glad that the music has died down. It was a little bit disturbing to hear, all the good, stuff that is coming from the panel. Yeah, so just giving some practical examples of, some challenges that countries, especially down south, where I'm coming from, with regards to nutrition, with regards to food systems. I joined the National Food and Nutrition Commission at the time that most partners, by partners I mean donors, the UN agencies that were supporting our nutrition efforts, were maybe changing focus or maybe rethinking, their funding. And of course, some of the embassies that have supported us, to a great deal, we're also, rethinking how they're going to continue with their aid because of wars that are happening and the like. So that adds a lot of pressure to countries like Zambia that are trying to make a lot of efforts. You realize, you look at our policies, you look at our strategies that we've put in place to deal with the high rates of malnutrition, you'd notice that we have very good plans, but with limited support coming through, it just derails all those plans to avert 35% of stunting that my country is going through, and high micronutrient deficiencies. So beyond that, you'd also realize that I think there are quite a number of efforts that are still happening. Some partners are able to, to do quite a lot of work. I've came across a very nice brochure. I don't know how I sat next to a brochure that was speaking about my country, and I did not know about, all that financing that is, supporting smallholder farmers and private sector in my country. So that also shows you how much we've been working in silos. I work for the commission that coordinates everything that should happen in the food and nutrition space in the country, and yet there are quite a number of things that will be happening that we are not aware about, and you hear them when you are outside the country, which should not really be the case. But Yes, so government is trying to do everything they can. A number of African countries would be experiencing a number of shocks, high debt burden that is, that derails government's focus despite all the good plans and the like, and just the limited financing when it comes to nutrition. So I feel that that is going to slow down the progress that we are so much in a hurry to, to fast track.
Thank you so much, and obviously very disturbing news, and one can only imagine you have a good plan, it's funded for a year, and then there's a drying up of the funding that's very dispiriting. It also, impedes progress. So I hope very much that collectively the efforts and all the talk about how do we get the financing in the right place, in the right quantities, in enough time, that we come through on that collectively. So then I would like just quickly, Juan Carlos, I'd love to have, from your point of view, on the International Financial Institution, how IFAD can support smallholder farmers to ensure healthy diets are sustainably produced. And again, if you have some concrete examples, that would be fantastic.
Thank you very much. For those of you that don't know, IFAD works with smallholder farmers, and we're talking people that have, less than 2 to 5 hectares of land, and they're very critical to nutrition simply because they produce globally about a quarter of the food, but in places just such as sub-Saharan Africa, as much as 75% of the food consumed. So whatever we do in our work with smallholder farmers really has an impact across the entire food systems of many of the countries where we work. And I won't repeat what others have said. Obviously, the current food system is not delivering. It's not delivering for the planet. I mean, it's responsible for about 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions, but it's not delivering nutrition for people. And it's as a result, about 40% of people around the world cannot afford on a reliable basis or cannot afford a nutritious diet. So let me tell you just very quickly a little bit of what we do. And again, something that was mentioned already, food consumption is driven by social norms. We work with smallholder farmers who themselves are, in many cases, suffering of food insecurity. And as it was mentioned, right now, something that we have learned is that as we work with them and they start increasing their incomes, they go from finally achieving food security, but actually in many cases, nutrition outcomes go down. Precisely the quintessential now there's cash, let's go buy packaged food. So we have learned that we need integrated approaches that come and work with the local communities also to do sort of social norm, I wouldn't call it change, but education and training of how you can have good nutrition even as incomes increase and use the additional income to increase diversity of food. So the first thing we do is we need to make sure that the people who put food in our table are themselves well nourished. So what we do, and I'm going to mention a couple of projects. You can look them up on our website for more details. One is the Paulo Freire project in Brazil. This is in the northeast of Brazil, some of the poor areas of the countries, and allow the Agriculture for Nutrition project. So what we do in both of those cases is, first, we come and work with the farmers to change the way they grow food, because a lot of the agroecology or agrobiodiversity approaches that we use actually deliver both for planet and for nutrition. A lot of the work that we do in agrobiodiversity includes reintroducing, because this is what people used to eat, neglected and underutilized species, or particularly if we're working with indigenous peoples, it's simply going back to or reincorporated some of the crops that have fallen through the site. That creates increase diversity in consumption, moving away from the monocrop and maybe processed food. But at the same time, we ensure that most of these farmers also have what we call a consumption garden, which is different from what they are producing to take to the market. The consumption garden, it's a relatively small portion of the plot that is used to grow a wide range of food, because we measure nutritional outcomes at the beginning just simply by looking at food diversity. There's a very important gender component here, and that is we cannot go back, or we need to be very careful when we do this type of training on cooking, which is literally what we do. We also need to think of, why is it that many households have moved to use the quintessential example, why polished rice as opposed to millet? Well, it's also because it's easier to cook, and it's normally easier for the woman, because that's the person who in most of these places is cooking the food. So we also need to understand many of the dimensions. So I think the message or what I want to leave you on this issue of behavioral change is we also need to understand why communities have made the choices that they have made. And once we understand that, we can have a more effective way if we feel that we can come in with new approaches. And then the last point is we need to create demand also for this type of more nutritious food. And sometimes demand starts by what you eat when you're a child. So a lot of what we're increasingly doing, for example, we have a project in Guatemala is to link local producers with the local school feeding program. So local producers are producing some of these neglected species, and then that goes straight into the menu that is being served in the local schools. And that creates a culture of increased diversity in consumption. Sorry if I went over my time.
Well, thank you. I think pretty much everyone here wouldn't mind hearing and reading a lot more about what all of you are doing, and I hope that's what people are inspired to do after today. We have just a couple of minutes for questions, and then Dr. Francisco Branco is from the World Health Organization is going to give us a few closing remarks. So anyone who has any questions, please raise a hand, and we'd love to answer a couple.
Hi, thank you all for your very interesting insights. So my question was about the last points that Juan made regarding the school feeding programs. So in addition to promoting, healthy foods in schools, how do we at the same time tackle all the unhealthy foods that are coming across outside of school, the chips and candies and cookies that they're coming across? So yes, just curious about your insights on that.
I mean, you've been speaking a bit on that. Does anyone else, since he has spoken, does anyone else have something
Sort
want
of
to jump in?
negative, how to discourage non-nutritious food, as opposed to, I mean, that is, and maybe I'll let some of my colleagues in the panel to address. Obviously, a lot of this has to do, again, with education. A lot of it is with disclosure. As you know, in many countries, increasingly, there are mandatory disclosure in the packaging. This applies to packaged food. On the other hand, in the context of school feeding programs, it always comes down to government procurement systems and what is cheaper. And unfortunately, it is true that what is cheaper is not always what is more nutritious.
So to add on that, I guess it's a problem really of behavior of people, or we can change the behavior of people. And for that, I guess we need also to invest more in innovation in the sense of, for instance, behavioral science. Because we had so many recipes or ways to address the things, and sometimes it does not work. And we have to reflect why. And probably this is a way we engage with the people. So I don't know if the solution is trying to say to people, this is wrong, or perhaps to say more to people, this is right. So we have really, and I guess this is really context specific. For some communities, it might be the wrong way to say and to basically have the blame and shame approach. For other communities, perhaps more efficient to have showing the right direction. So, not sure there is one fits all answer. This is really something that is really specific to the different context on where we are in terms of nutritious food. So I guess I would leave it here. We need really to have social aspect in that.
Thank you both so much.
Just very quickly, like, so one of the things that we are doing in few districts that we are working in one of the states in India is there are two parts to it. One is, as the panelists said about the behavior change communication. How do we shift the notion that packaged food is more aspirational to some of the locally available food? So what is the kind of behavior change that would shift that aspirational value to local food? And secondly, we are also studying some of the small and medium industries who are currently producing food, but they do not invest enough in product formulation. So is there a role that government can play or academic institutions can play to create recipes and provide these recipes which can leverage the existing supply chain and replace the poor nutritious food with nutritious food at a similar price point? So that is something that we are piloting in few districts, both from the consumer side of it as well as from the supply side of it.
Thank you. And Matthews, I don't want to not give you a chance if you've got something to say. Otherwise, we can jump to another question and then we'll have to switch up.
Yeah, I think just to quickly jump in, as indicated that sometimes it's also context specific. So you realize that if you come to my country, school feeding programs are mostly in remote parts of the country, and in the urban setting it's different. But what government has done, because my institution has a duty to provide feeding guidelines to public institutions. So would work with schools to prescribe how, what should be stocked in their tuck shops, and, people that are given permits to sell food around the school, what kind of food they should also be selling. So I think, yeah, that's my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I guess I would just quickly say, since it just was out yesterday, that the FAO's, the roadmap of getting to moving food systems into alignment to 1.5 degrees did mention on this specific point the idea of removing some of the advertising specifically targeted to children for ultra non-nutritious food. Is there anyone else who has a question? Yes, please. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had one.
Hi there. Charlie Worthington, Food Systems Lead at Consumers International. We heard a lot about subsidies. We've been working with 200 members around the world for a long time on shifting the production level subsidies to align public money with public good, and not made a lot of progress in a lot of contexts. Is there something more that we're missing that consumer groups, civil society groups could be doing on that front? And the other side of that question is there value in focusing more on consumer level subsidies as a solution, in particularly looking at balancing subsidies for consumers that supports access to healthy diets without compromising kind of dignity, not just asking vulnerable consumers to have kind of money that's tied only to being able to spend on certain products is often a challenge in certain contexts.
So thank you very much for that question, which more or less felt like there were maybe 3 or 4 fantastic individual questions in it. And we only have about 3 or 4 minutes left, so I'd love to pass the microphone down, and if each of you could give sort of 30, 40 seconds worth of a quick answer, that would be fantastic.
I think shifting subsidies to the consumer would be ideal. However, it's very difficult to implement. So one needs to strike a balance on which one either you apply, either a subsidy on the consumer or a tax on the producers of unhealthy food, which sometimes is easier to implement.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. Marcia?
So I will, what you said basically, I will fully endorse, but to add, this is really related to the aspect that we have to look at the qualitative aspect of the finance flow. It's not just the full amount, but basically the quality of those flows in terms of subsidies, in terms of the debt swap. So you have all to be tackled and addressed in the same time. So this is just, I want to add that on this question.
So I'll just like to give one example which has started in few parts in India where government is now subsidizing, trying to remove the subsidies on conventional agriculture and providing that subsidies to state governments if they start taking up regenerative agriculture. So that's one way in which that subsidy, the same amount of money is being used to scale up and to increase the regenerative agriculture. So that could be one of the ways in which existing subsidies can be rechannelized, which will help both the farmers for better production, for better nutrition, and would also help the climate change.
Okay, so simply to agree with the suggestions that have come, I think they're quite brilliant, and I would not add more.
Well, thank you, and thank you all very much. And I think it is our great pleasure now to invite up to speak Francesco Branca.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Megan, for this excellent moderation and keeping us on time. And I'd like to thank all the speakers and the panelists for the very insightful contribution. And we are really at the end of the COP. So it's almost like, taking stock of what has happened in the last 2 weeks. So first of all, I'd like to take the invitation of Erthrin to be optimistic. And I'd like to look at the half-full glass. The half-full glass is that we do have food system transformation and nutrition on the agenda of climate adaptation and mitigation. If I get the numbers right, now we have 152 countries who have signed the Emirates Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture. And that basically promotes nutrition by increasing efforts to support vulnerable people through social protection system, social safety nets, school feeding, public procurement programs, and at the same time protect the environment. But at the same time, we do have another declaration, which is the Declaration on Climate Change and Health, signed by 141 countries, and that requires to take action on climate change and shifting to sustainable, healthy diets. So if you bring the two together, I think that's great, sensational. And you know who is bringing that together? Nutrition. Nutrition is the connector. Nutrition is going to break the silos, Matthew. It will help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, protect planetary resources and biodiversity, through healthy diets, safe foods, clean water, and less disease. Now, how do we do that? And that's a challenge. One of the ICANN paper produced by FAO has 4 domains. It says, we have to work on agri-food system, food security, healthy diets, loss and waste. We have to work on water systems, water management and wash. We have to work on social protection systems, support livelihoods, consider gender, you mentioned that, but also you mentioned supporting the purchase of healthy foods, like the example in India. And then we have to work with health systems and make sure that we have essential nutrition actions mainstreamed as part of universal health coverage, and have adequate food procurements, for example, in hospitals. We should have good food in all public institutions. So we do need to work on the policies. We need to work at national policies. We need to work on sub-national policies. Of course, India is a special situation. So we've also heard that there are some specific targets, like working on those who produce 1/4 of our food, the small holders. We have discussed the resourcing, and the picture is that there's very little resources around, but that means that there's a lot of scope for change. So whatever we will do will be a lot more. I think Lawrence also mentioned the companies, and we've been hearing a lot about companies being able to make an investment. And now, why should we make an investment, as actually was asking us? Of course, it's for health. Of course, it's for the environment, but it's also for the economics. And I was digging out some numbers. What are the externalities? How can we estimate them? True cost of food. Externalities accrue from $7 trillion in environmental cost, 11 trillion US in cost to human life, and $1 trillion in economic cost. So it's enormous cost, but then people say, okay, fine, but that somebody else is going to pay that cost. what is in for me as an investor? There is probably, and maybe we need to make that clear, opportunities for profit as well. So we reduce the cost, but we generate profit. So what should be done? And what should we do? Well, first of all, we have to join the discussion on reorienting agricultural subsidies. Worldwide support for food and agriculture accounted for almost $630 billion per year in the periods 2013 and 2018. That was the finding of the State of Food Security and Nutrition Report 2022. So if we repurpose public support to make healthy diet less costly, reduce inequalities and pursue sustainability goals, that's a big advantage. It's a complex discussion, but we need to join that discussion. Then we need to promote integrated climate and nutrition finance, and I'm really pleased to have this collaboration between FAST and ICANN, for example. We need to engage in climate and health investment framework. There's a mechanism, there's an Alliance for Transformative Action on Climate and Health. There's a finance working group. We need to engage there. Then we need to join forces, among all of us, and really, I like the idea of the sister partnership. And those sister partnerships can do a lot together. But we also need to join the discussion on private sector investment. In this COP, the independent high-level expert group on climate finance calculated investment needs in 2.3 trillion. So if that investment is going to be mobilized, there's enormous opportunities for change. And finally, again, Erthrin's suggestion, the measurement, the reporting, and the verification. So we need some data to demonstrate not only what is the benefit in theory, but what is the benefit in practice and what has happened. So I really like to say that we do have the half-full glass, but it's all of us to fill the other half. So thank you very much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you very much, Francesco. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And let's go forward with our optimism and change the world.